The movie begins by introducing a scientist and his daughter, Wei. Both of them have strange marks on their faces that diminish their beauty. The scientist has built a lab in his home and has been conducting experiments for a long time. At this moment, Wei is drawing a picture of a flower called the crop flower. Her father tells her that this flower has incredible healing properties and that it only grows deep within the jungle once in many years. The scientist explains that he has used this flower multiple times in his experiments. After many days of hard work, the scientist finally succeeds in creating a serum that can hide the marks on his face. He has developed a chemical that can fuse two pieces of flesh together. To test it, he cuts a piece of skin, applies the chemical, and sticks it onto his face. The moment it touches his face, the skin starts melting, and his tissues begin regenerating. The piece of skin gradually covers the wound, but something unexpected happens. It doesn't stop. Instead of just covering the scar, the new skin starts spreading all over his face. Terrified, the scientist tries to cut the excess skin, especially around his lips and eyes. But no matter how much he cuts, the skin regenerates and spreads further. His daughter, Wei, watches in horror as her father struggles against the out-of-control experiment. Overcome by fear, Wei grabs a sharp object and stabs her father, killing him. Shocked and devastated, she realizes that she has just killed her own father. She is now alone. Time passes, and Wei continues her studies. Just like her father, she is highly intelligent and excels in academics. Because of her excellence, she earns a scholarship to a prestigious university in the U.S. She leaves her hometown and moves to the U.S. to stay with her aunt, who has a daughter named Angie. However, Angie is not happy about Wei's arrival since it means she has to share her room with her. After settling into her room, Wei sets up a small temple with a picture of her father, revealing that she still worships him. Later, she finds some of her father's notes and belongings, which show that she has continued working on the very experiment that led to his death. The next day, as Wei is on her way to university, she encounters a homeless man with a severely disfigured face. She stares at him for a few moments before he helps her by giving directions to the university. At the university, her professor proudly introduces her to the class, announcing that she scored 100% on the entrance test, something that hasn't happened in years. After class, Wei sneaks into the university's science lab to collect some materials for her experiment. However, the professor catches her and asks what she is doing. She tells him that she wants to conduct some experiments and needs supplies. The professor informs her that taking materials without permission is not allowed, but offers her a deal. If she becomes his lab assistant, she will have full access to the lab. Wei eagerly agrees, explaining that her father was also a scientist and that she wants to continue his research. She even shows the professor her father's research diary, which surprises and intrigues him. After Wei leaves, the professor searches for information about her father and discovers that he was indeed a brilliant scientist. However, due to a lack of funding, he was never able to complete his research. Meanwhile, back at home, Angie's two friends visit her and start snooping through Wei's belongings. They find bloodstained tools, strange experiment-related objects, and horrifying pictures of Wei's experiments. Terrified, they quickly leave. The next day, Wei sees Angie sitting with her friends and feels lonely. She wants to make friends too, so she approaches them and offers to buy them lunch. However, due to the marks on Wei's face, they feel uneasy around her. Although hesitant at first, they agree to go to the restaurant. But once there, they are disturbed by the way Wei eats and decide to leave her alone in the restaurant. Wei, feeling rejected, packs the leftover food and gives it to the homeless man with the disfigured face. She also talks to him about her sadness, telling him how the mark on her face makes her feel ugly. The homeless man reassures her, saying that she is beautiful just the way she is. This conversation makes Wei feel a little better. On her way home, she runs into her professor, who offers her a ride. He then tells her that he wants to help complete her father's research. Since this research originally belonged to her father, he needs Wei's permission to proceed. Wei is overjoyed and immediately agrees, as the professor is the first person to support her work. The next day, they begin working on the experiment together. Despite weeks of effort, they fail to achieve the desired results, and their hard work seems to be in vain. Frustrated, the professor decides to abandon the experiment. That same day, Angie's friend Alice arrives at the lab, hoping to apply for the position of lab assistant. The professor accepts her request. Later, while going home, Alice and Wei take the same route. During the journey, Wei apologizes to Angie for past misunderstandings and tries to mend their relationship. At this moment, Alice is carrying a poster featuring the same flower that Wei's father used in his experiments. Seeing the poster, Wei recalls her father's words. This flower was essential for their experiment to succeed. She learns that the flower is currently on display at a nearby exhibition and becomes determined to obtain it. That night, Wei sneaks into the exhibition and steals the flower. She then takes it to the science lab and resumes her experiment. However, the professor and Alice had been hiding in the lab and secretly observing her. In her excitement, Wei fails to notice them. She extracts the flower's essence and incorporates it into the experiment. Then, she cuts a piece of skin from her foot, divides it into 2 pieces, and applies the serum. To her amazement, the serum successfully fuses the 2 pieces of skin together. She then applies the serum to the wound on her foot and attaches a piece of skin. Instantly, the skin regenerates, completely healing the wound. The professor, watching through the window, is astonished. He immediately sends Alice away and then approaches Wei to question her about what she is doing. Wei explains how the flower's serum has finally made their experiment successful. As she demonstrates the serum's effects on her foot, Alice misinterprets the situation and becomes jealous. Secretly, she takes disturbing pictures of Wei. She then storms in, scolds Wei, and drags her away. Wei, shaken by Alice's sudden outburst, accidentally leaves her research notebook in the lab. The professor, now alone, picks up the diary and feels ecstatic about the discovery. Meanwhile, Alice sends the pictures to Angie, who becomes furious. Enraged, Angie storms into Wei's room and starts destroying her belongings. When Wei arrives and sees the mess, she is heartbroken. Suddenly, Angie attacks her from behind. Wei desperately tries to defend herself, but Angie is relentless. In the struggle, Wei grabs a pen and accidentally stabs Angie in the throat, killing her instantly. Panicking, Wei drags Angie's body into the bathroom, trying to figure out what to do. A sinister idea crosses her mind. She starts peeling off Angie's skin, carefully removing the entire layer from her face. She then injects the serum into her own face and places Angie's skin over it. The tissue fuses together, and Wei's appearance completely transforms. She now looks exactly like Angie. Later, when Angie's mother returns home, she mistakes Wei for her daughter and embraces her warmly. Feeling accepted and loved for the first time, Wei sees this as an opportunity. She decides not just to impersonate Angie, but to fully replace her. The next morning, she dresses in Angie's clothes, adopts her mannerisms, and seamlessly integrates into her life, enjoying the privileges that come with being Angie. When she went to university, the first person she met was Angie's boyfriend. It was the first time a boy had come so close to her, and it felt really good. She started enjoying Angie's life along with Angie's face, and this made her realize that her own life had been very boring. Angie had good friends, a boyfriend, and a loving mom. She even went on a date with Angie's boyfriend, and when they were getting close to each other, suddenly, Angie's skin started peeling off from her face. Seeing this, the boy got terrified. It was so creepy that he ran away from her in fear. While backing away, he didn't realize that there was a slope behind him, and he fell down, dying on the spot. She rushed back home in fear and started looking for her dad's notebook, as she believed it might have the secret to permanently attaching the skin. However, she couldn't find it because the professor had it. But at this time, she had a little bit of serum left, which she injected into herself again and regained Angie's face. Meanwhile, the professor was shown searching for the flower that could make the experiment successful. While searching for the flower, he received a call from his translator, who was translating the notebook into English. The translator told him that the experiment was extremely dangerous, and carrying it out could be risky. He clearly instructed the professor to stop the experiment immediately, but the professor ignored his warnings. She then went to the university lab to retrieve her dad's book, but she couldn't find it anywhere because the professor had given it to his translator. So, she called the professor, who told her that he had the book but wouldn't give it to her anymore because he was going to publish the experiment under his own name. Hearing this, she got extremely angry, but there was nothing she could do, so she left quietly. As soon as she stepped out of the university, she saw Eve and learned that Eve was also having an affair with the professor. She decided to take out her anger on Eve. Disguised as Angie, she invited Eve to her house, and Eve agreed to come over. When Eve arrived, she attacked her in a fit of rage. Eve, shocked and scared, ran and hid in the garden to save herself, but she found her there too. She then killed Eve by attacking her with a drill machine. After killing Eve, she also removed her skin and placed it on her own face. Now, she looked exactly like Eve. She styled her hair like Eve and wore her clothes to completely transform into her. Looking through Eve's phone, she also copied Eve's mannerisms so that no one would suspect anything. During all this, the neighbor's dog saw everything and started barking loudly. Because of this, the neighbors called the police. When the police arrived, they saw Eve, who was actually her in disguise, wrapped in a towel and left without questioning anything. In the morning, she went to university in Eve's disguise and felt great because Eve was a very popular student. Everyone was happy to see her. Later, disguised as Eve, she went to the professor's house, knowing she could finally get her dad's notebook there. The professor had no idea that the person standing in front of him was actually her in Eve's disguise, so he let her in. She searched the entire house for her dad's notebook, but couldn't find it anywhere. Frustrated, she left. At night, she first hid the bodies of Angie and Eve, dumping them into the pool. Then, she checked their phones and found a picture of herself with the professor, which Alice had intended to use to defame her. She decided to use this picture against the professor instead and emailed it to the authorities. Once the authorities learned that the professor was using young women for his own benefit, they had him arrested immediately. However, the professor had powerful connections. The very next day, he was released on bail and went straight home to restart the experiment, which originally belonged to her father. Step by step, he followed the process and finally managed to create the serum. He then tried to fuse two pieces of skin tissue, and to his astonishment, they merged together. His experiment was successful. The professor was overwhelmed with joy. At the same time, she, still disguised as Eve, arrived at the professor's house. Seeing her, the professor became even more excited and invited her into his living room before heading to the kitchen to get something to drink. She had come for her dad's notebook. The moment he left, she began searching for it. In one of the cabinets, she found the serum that the professor had just created. As soon as she got it, she didn't waste any time. She ran away. When the professor returned and saw that she was gone, he got suspicious. He checked his cabinet and discovered that the serum was missing. That night, she was back home in her real form when Alice arrived, worried about their two missing friends. She seemed really upset. She comforted Alice and hugged her. When Alice went to the fridge to get some water, she was horrified to find the dismembered body parts of her two friends stored inside. Shocked, she screamed. Before anyone could hear her, or she could run away to inform someone, she covered Alice's mouth with a clean cloth, suffocating her to death. She had not yet hidden Alice's body when the doorbell rang. It was the professor. He had entered the house after finding the door unlocked. Inside, she was sitting in a strange manner. As soon as she saw the professor, she started laughing hysterically. Her behavior made the professor uneasy. However, when she congratulated him on his experiment's success, the professor felt pleased. But then, in a fit of rage, she yelled that it wasn't his experiment but her father's. The professor ignored her words and walked toward the fridge to get his serum. The moment he opened the fridge and saw the dead bodies, he was horrified. Now, it was difficult to control him, but she acted cleverly. She stabbed a syringe filled with a sedative into the professor's neck, rendering him unconscious. When the professor regained consciousness a while later, he found that she had completely peeled off his skin. Seeing himself in this state, he started screaming in agony. Meanwhile, she injected him with the serum and placed a piece of skin on his exposed body. To his horror, the skin started growing on its own, just like in the beginning when the scientist in the movie had grown skin on his face. She had placed a straw in the professor's mouth, but apart from that, the skin covered everything, suffocating him. Within moments, he died. His final screams were heard by the neighbors, who immediately informed the police again. Now, she had no way out. She ran to a homeless man she used to help and asked for his assistance. The homeless man, who always thought of her as kind, agreed to hide her under his blanket. Because of this, the police couldn't find her. But just as she sat down to hide, the serum she was carrying suddenly shattered. Due to the broken serum, her and the homeless man's body tissues started merging together. Their bodies fused, transforming them into a horrifying monster. She could do nothing now. As she sat there, now a monster, she saw her aunt, who had come looking for her daughter, Angie. But she couldn't even tell her about Angie. And with this, the story came to an end. Do like and share this video, and please subscribe to this channel for more such video.